Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something pretty unique, an intelligence-style report that profiles a potential future global leader. But here's the twist. It's not based on political analysis. It's based on ancient prophetic texts. And our goal is to break down how those ancient patterns could actually translate into very modern systems of power. Let's get into it. Right. So this report, which is dated March 2026, it's not just some abstract theory. It drops us right into a specific crisis scenario, a collapse in Iran that triggers a massive worldwide energy shock. So you can think of this as a kind of strategic playbook, but it's one that's using rules that are literally thousands of years old.
And this really is the core question the whole document wrestles with. The idea is that a profound crisis doesn't just need a leader. It actually creates the perfect conditions for a certain kind of leader, one who offers a profound and maybe even dangerously absolute solution.
So to identify this leader, the report just completely bypasses things like resumes and political parties. Instead, it lays out what it calls a fourfold test, a blueprint of criteria drawn straight from the biblical books of Daniel and Revelation. It's basically a template for a very specific pattern of power. The first criterion really hinges on this ancient text. Now, the report doesn't interpret this as some vague prediction, but as a direct geographical and political link to a major historical event. So the first test is all about origin. The prophecy says the leader comes from the people who destroyed Jerusalem, and the report interprets this as a political and geographical origin, not an ethnic one. And in modern terms, that points directly to the sphere of influence of the old Roman Empire, which is essentially modern Europe and its big supranational structures like the EU. Okay, the second test is incredibly specific. This isn't just about brokering any old peace deal. The document highlights that, according to the prophecy in Daniel 9:27, the leader has to be the one to orchestrate a formal 7-year agreement that involves Israel and, as the text puts it, the many. This is flagged as a key prophetic marker to watch for. The third test is about a really unique kind of charisma. The ancient text describes someone with a fierce countenance who can understand dark sentences. Now, in today's world, what does that even mean? Well, think of a master communicator. A technocrat who can take these incredibly complex global problems, financial crises, climate change, geopolitical chaos, and just distill them into a simple, compelling narrative that everyone can understand and get behind. And that brings us to the final criterion, which connects directly to one of the most famous and maybe most chilling prophecies of all. This makes it clear it's not just about political power. It's about a very specific, very absolute form of economic control. And this is the final piece of that prophetic profile, a leader who rolls out a system that gives them total control over the economy, right down to the simple acts of buying and selling. So now let's see how the report takes this 4-part ancient blueprint and actually applies it to potential real-world leadership archetypes. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, because the report doesn't just leave this as ancient history. It actually game plans 3 modern archetypes, 3 types of leaders who could plausibly emerge from a 2026-style crisis and actually fit this prophetic mold. The analysis identifies 3 main vectors, or power centers, where a leader like this could realistically emerge. First, the supranational bodies of European technocracy. Second, the high-stakes world of Middle Eastern diplomacy. And third, the totally borderless domain of the global technology sector. The first archetype, the European technocrat, fits that Roman origin criterion perfectly. This isn't someone who rises through a popular election. Instead, they're appointed during a massive emergency to manage a crisis. They become the indispensable problem solver, which in turn positions them as the perfect neutral arbiter for a Middle East peace plan. The second archetype directly addresses that diplomatic masterpiece criterion. This is a figure who might emerge from the Abraham Accords framework, someone who can finally broker the ultimate peace deal. And the report notes this person might even be a religious figure, the so-called false prophet who gives spiritual validation to the political leader's authority. And this third archetype? Wow. It really shows how that final economic control criterion could be met. Imagine a global banking collapse. A tech reader emerges and offers a solution: universal basic income, delivered through a biometric digital ID. It's presented to the world as this great act of mercy, but what it really does is create the exact infrastructure for the kind of control the prophecies have warned about for centuries. But how does someone get that kind of power, and so quickly?
Well, the report points back to the scriptures for a very specific pattern of ascent that it calls the little horn strategy, a rapid, shocking rise from the shadows. So a major global shock, like a financial meltdown or a military conflict, acts as the catalyst. The established leaders, they fail, and that creates a massive power vacuum. This allows someone from a secondary role, a deputy, a technocrat, a special envoy, to be elevated almost overnight to the position of an indispensable global leader.
And all of this brings us to the end game that's described in the report. How the prophetic concept of the mark of the beast doesn't have to be some kind of literal tattoo, but can actually be translated into a very modern recognizable systems concept. Look at this. On the left, you have the prophetic concept. On the right, the modern system's equivalent. The report argues that the modern mark is any architecture that fuses your personal identity, your political ideology or allegiance, and your basic access to the economy into one single mandatory system. The warning here is to scrutinize the function of the system, no matter what it's branded as.
And this is really the crucial point of this entire analysis. It's not about pointing fingers or naming a specific individual. The authors are really clear that its purpose is to encourage a very specific kind of vigilance. The report is crystal clear on this. This is not about naming a specific person. It's meant to be a tool for discernment, a lens to help people recognize when the real-world structures of power start to align with these ancient prophetic patterns. Exactly. The warning is about the system, not the individual. It's about being vigilant about the architecture of control, regardless of who's sitting at the top. So in the end, the analysis leaves us with this one final thought. In a world that's desperate for answers to catastrophic problems, it is absolutely vital to critically examine the systems we embrace and the leaders we empower. It asks all of us to consider, at what point does a system designed to save us become a system that completely controls us?